Welcome to AI Insights in EdTech, Leading Voices, brought to you by the Windward Institute. I'm Dr. Joan McGettigan, Director of Educational Technology at the Windward School, which serves students with dyslexia and other language-based learning disabilities. As a former classroom teacher and current presenter at national conferences like ISTE, I've had the opportunity to explore the role of technology in transforming education. Most recently, I focused on the exciting potential of artificial intelligence, or AI, to support both teaching and learning. Today's episode takes a deep dive into how AI can be leveraged to support students with dyslexia on their learning journeys. As Josh Clark, head of the Landmark School and chairman of the International Dyslexia Association, recently explained in an interview with EdWeek, he said AI has the potential to enhance key areas where dyslexic students often struggle, such as writing, spelling, and communication skills. With a significant portion of the U.S. population affected by dyslexia, the need to explore how AI can bridge these gaps has never been more critical. I'm excited to be joined today by Alexis Pokna, the director at the Windward Institute. Together, we'll explore this evolving landscape and how AI is shaping the future of learning for students with learning differences. In this series, we will feature leading voices in AI who are passionate about advancing education. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Mike Tholfsen from Microsoft Education. Microsoft offers powerful AI tools such as Copilot and a variety of AI-powered tools to enhance teaching, learning, and administration. Mike is a 30-year veteran at Microsoft and passionate about education. Mike has been regularly working with students and teachers around the world over the past decade to create products that improve student outcomes. He is an experienced product leader with a deep understanding of the education space, customers, engineering life cycle, and software development. He is passionate about building great products and teams with a focus on the customer. If you haven't seen his vibrant channels in TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, you are missing out. Join us on this journey as we explore, learn, and wonder together about the possibilities of AI in education. Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for joining Alexis and I. We're thrilled to have you here with a deep dive into AI, Microsoft, reading accelerators, everything in the world that will help our teachers out. But first, we'd like to begin with, if you could just tell us a little bit about your journey, how you landed at Microsoft Education, and how you help, through your work, how you help educators around the world learn about all of these fabulous tools.
Sure. Well, I've been at Microsoft almost 30 years, which is, I think, probably strange in this day and age. I entered straight out of college and I started in software engineering. Now I'm in product management. So I'm the group product manager on Microsoft Education team. And in terms of education software, I switched over probably almost 15 years ago, where I started engineering. I worked on various products at Microsoft, which I won't go into a bunch of details there. And then I was working on the OneNote team about 20 years ago. And somewhere in there, I started to experiment with using OneNote, which initially has been a note-taking application and is brand new. And I started working with educators and students to experiment with new ways of using OneNote in the education space. And because it was a new product, there was a lot of interesting ideas, and I sort of got very interested in education at that point. I don't have a educator background, but I just worked with a lot of teachers and students to experiment with that. And then a few years later, the Microsoft Education team, which I'm on now, got forged into existence. Because at that time, we didn't really have an education team. And then one got started up. Because I'd been working with education on the OneNote team, they said, hey, why don't you move over to this new education product team and keep doing some of this stuff and experimenting. And so that's how I got into the education space. And then the other part that I think is maybe interesting career aspect that got me really into reading and literacy and dyslexia in particular was pretty much serendipitous. So back in 2015, almost 10 years ago, Microsoft had its very first global hackathon. And what a hackathon is where anyone in your company can work on whatever project they want that they're passionate about for about a week. So you get a bunch of people together from different parts of the company and you hack, you prototype, you put together ideas around something brand new. And so I was known as someone who was working on education at the company. There were also some people who were experts in reading, so some reading PhD experts, some accessibility experts, and some other folks who all got together and they reached out to me and they said, "Hey, you're into education, you might want to join this project." And the project was, let's take the latest science and research around reading, because there's a lot of it over the last 50 years. It's not always put into software, but there's been a lot of research. And what if we focused inclusively on dyslexia and we tried to take some of those research items that have been in existence and build them into software, into a tool that can really help people with dyslexia? But with inclusive design, the idea is this will probably help many other people outside the realm of dyslexia, because that's how inclusive design will often work. And so that's what we did. And we made this hackathon project that ultimately turned into what's now called the immersive reader. And this
One of my
hackathon,
favorite tools.
yeah, that came from a hackathon. And that tool actually won the Microsoft Global Hackathon, which was not planned. It was like very exciting. We're like, oh my gosh, like we won the global hackathon with this immersive reader. And so then the education team and our vice president said to me that, like, hey, Mike, why don't you work with some people on the education team and take this little barely working prototype and try to build it into a real thing? So we did. And so we built the immersive reader. We started working with teachers and students. And that ultimately led to things even more. We got into reading progress. We got into reading coach. So we really started going further and further into reading and inclusive design and accessibility tools based on that little initiative, that little hackathon from almost 10 years ago. So that's how I got into that space. And now I feel like I've done a lot in that space at this point, and we've worked with a lot of reading scientists and reading experts and accessibility experts and educators from all the world. And as we've been prototyping and developing those tools.
That's a great story. And your journey certainly has resulted in just vast impact, and I think improved so many lives. So thank you.
Oh yeah,
Thank you
right.
for
It's
joining that
been great. It's been
hackathon.
fun. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I'm really interested to dive more in a few minutes into the reading space and specifically the space around dyslexia and children who are struggling with reading. But I'm wondering if first you can frame for us. You've worked with so many teachers and so many schools. What are three kind of big points or framing considerations for folks to be thinking about in terms of the relationship between AI and education?
Yes, that is a topic that's on everyone's mind these days. And yeah, my team also, like many other groups at Microsoft, like many other industries, and including education, are really exploring AI and especially generative AI, so what's interesting is we've been doing quote AI for many years. Like my team has worked on what you would historically call AI features, but I would call it old school AI. And so when generative AI and ChatGPT came out in late 2022, that really brought AI to the forefront. So now like everything is AI, but there's been a lot of AI projects over the years. It's just that we didn't either call it AI or it was machine learning, or it didn't have the same zeitgeist as everything that's happening now. And so in terms of AI and education, one thing I would say for educators and staff, especially who, there's been a mix of excitement and fear and worry, and a lot of that might come on, especially the writing side of things with generative AI and, oh, is AI going to help with doing homework or help with cheating or helping with X, Y, and Z? And so when you hear AI, I would just say, don't assume all AI is the same, right? AI can mean many different things. It might be generating content, it might be generating images, but it also, in students' cases, it could be just giving personalized coaching and personalized help, right? So it sort of depends on, don't paint it all with the same brush. And that's one thing we've learned. We're working on many different projects. The other part is there's AI for educators and staff, and there could be AI for students. And some of the educators and staff aspects, and that's my team is working a lot on those first right now, is that those are enormous time savers. It could be bureaucracy reduction, could be time savers, it could be helping scale and doing things you never had time to do before. So separate from what the students might be using it for, as an example, and this is just one example, our team has been building things to help teachers generate rubrics, for example. Like that can save a teacher 5 minutes every day. Generate rubrics, generate comprehension questions. I actually just spoke to the wife of a colleague of mine who's an educator, and she said, "Oh my gosh, this weekend she was using Copilot, and it's in about 30 minutes, she said she did something that would take her weeks and weeks to do in the past. She was doing, they're doing a bunch of book reports and a bunch of book units and book clubs, and they're supposed to, for each chapter, generate a set of questions and Socratic methods and things that would take her a lot of time to just sit down and do over and over again. And using Copilot and iterating, she was able to generate a bunch of questions that she's going to use with her class, and she can tweak and edit these. But she was able to just go through and save enormous amounts of time. And she said to her husband, my colleague, like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe how much time I just saved with Copilot." So it could just be reducing the drudgery in certain tasks. But then on the scaling part for educators, another great example that I love, we just rolled out, we have these things called learning accelerators. And this is what I would call AI enhanced learning. It's not things like ChatGPT. This, in this case, is built into Microsoft Teams for Education, and it's totally free. So all these things are free. And we built some AI enhanced learning based on different skills. So reading, public speaking, math, information literacy and search, and student well-being. So as an example, we have this tool called Speaker Progress and Speaker Coach, and these are built into Microsoft Teams for Education. So imagine, you've heard of Toastmasters. When I was younger, they still exist now, but there's this program called Toastmasters, and you go physically into a room of people and you practice a presentation, and they give you feedback on counting your uhs and ums and likes, your pace, your hand, your body language, expression, all these things that take time. So if you're an educator and you're doing group projects, sometimes maybe once or twice a year, you might give students feedback on their communication and presentation skills. It's very time consuming for educators to do that one at a time, each person, or maybe the group project. And because it was so time consuming, they wouldn't do it often. Well, now with Speaker Progress, we can use AI, and it's AI, but it's not ChatGPT AI. It's audio. It's analyzing the audio streams and analyzing the visual streams. And a student can practice a presentation, a PowerPoint, or just a video, and the AI will listen to them and give them feedback afterwards, or real-time coaching on how many times you say ah, or like, or or repeating words, or your pace, or your pitch, or your body language. A lot of times people might be doing stuff like this and covering their face or looking different directions. All of that can be captured and given as feedback to students, and also captured as given feedback to teachers to be able to review this and then track those progress points over time. Oh, your pacing is getting better over time, or the number of likes and ahs and ums and as the person who tally that up in Toastmasters, we can digitally do that. Because teachers can do that at scale now. They can make these assignments on a more regular basis because they have time, and the AI helps them scale, and students get more practice. And we've interviewed students, and they want this feedback. They want to be able to communicate better, but the teachers typically didn't have time. So that's another way we're just thinking about how educators can save time and scale out and do things that maybe they couldn't do previously. And then the last category is just the ability to get personalized coaching and feedback from students. And not just in writing, right? Yes, writing is the thing that everyone talks about, but like I said, reading, and we'll talk more about that, get real-time coaching in reading, or public speaking, or information literacy, or math, or well-being. So there's lots of places where AI can be the dream of that personalized coaching and tips to the student in all the different ways that students work. Student with dyslexia might need different coaching and tips than a non-native speaker, or someone who's a recent Ukrainian immigrant, which we've had using our tools, is going to need different coaching than the advanced honor students who's a native English speaker, let's say. So all those things could be very personalized and different, and AI can help speed up that process.
So Mike, these are all such wonderful tools and really, I think are game changers in so many ways. So what can, it's kind of a two-part question, what can educators do to help prepare students understand this brave new world? And then what do you think administrators can do to really support teachers and students in this effort?
Well, maybe I'll answer the second part first with administrators preparing teachers and themselves, honestly. I mean, and everyone needs to sort of get comfortable with it. I think for administrators, like I was saying earlier, the first thing is think about how much time your educators could save and think about how much time your staff might be able to save. And what we found is a lot of time just showing administrators what some of these tools can do, like Copilot or Copilot for N365, which is taking the power of AI and infusing it into places like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. And a lot of times administrators aren't even aware of those benefits, because making your staff more efficient and comfortable and maybe less fear, that can get everyone comfortable. It's hard as an educator to be able to talk to your students about AI if you yourself are not comfortable or aware of how some of these things work. You don't need to be an expert, but at least understanding some of the capabilities, even for yourself and practicing, is really important. So, for example, Microsoft has multiple free courses on our Microsoft Learn Center for educators on just AI 101 or Copilot 101, getting comfortable with what's a large language model, what's image generation, what's responsible AI. That's responsible AI is something where transparency, accountability, how do we train the models? Is it compliant? Is it secure? All these things go into any AI capability. So being aware of these, whether you're administrator or educator, is really important, because you might assume a bunch of things that aren't accurate, or you might assume it works this way and it doesn't. Like one example I like to give with Excel, right? Microsoft Excel has Copilot integration now. And for a lot of educators and even staff, we found Excel can be intimidating for some people.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, thinking through outside of, again, this, a lot of people just think Chat GPT or you know, that model of things. Think about Excel. And if we have all of your school rostering and information built into the what's called the grounding in the background, which if you have Copilot with M365, all that data is sort of in the system. You could go into Excel, and instead of having to know all these formulas and all these features and charts and like all the stuff that people don't have PhDs in Excel typically, but most people can use natural language, meaning, you know, in our case, English. You can talk to Excel, and you can say with natural language, for example, if we have all your roster and the grades and students, you could say, make me a color-coded heat map of my 8th grade science class and compare, you know, Johnny to Sally in a bar chart and give me the historical background for the last 6 months. Excel can pull all that in because it knows a lot of those things. It can make a heat map. It can pull out those specific students and make a lot. It can do a lot of things by you just saying, okay, and now I'd like some pie charts across X, Y, and Z for these students. Or if you're an administrator, imagine the types of things you can start talking with your data. So one of the things they like to say is the most popular computer programming language 5 years from now is going to be the English language. For America, let's say, because being able to talk with and analyze data with AI and a Copilot, you can do really powerful things. Or like using Power BI, which is a more advanced data analysis tool. Administrators can start saying, I'm a principal, I want to show me the data across these types of schools and these types of students and these demographics over this period of time. Something that you might be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a consultant to create 4 dashboards. You can create that with talking to it or typing in very, very simply. So that's one thing, is how can you get your educators and staff familiar with what AI is, what large language models can do, and what are some of the ways that it might save you and your staff time? And there's lots of, again, there's trainings on that, there's examples on that, and getting comfortable. When you get to students, for the educators to getting students comfortable, there's probably a lot of students who are out there playing around with it right now. So there's some amount of it's probably happening, whether you know it or not. But then also just making sure students, even with the responsible AI, like letting students know how it might be used, what is the data, what they're typing in, what they're getting out. Sometimes students might not know about how this whole machine works behind the scenes, and whether it's the responsible pieces, security, compliance. For a lot of schools, there is like, hey, you shouldn't be taking a bunch of school data and putting it into some consumer open-ended product. It should stay within our school boundary. Like, here's why that's important, and here's how it works. And if you're going to be using AI in the large language model type, well, here's how you should do it. Here's the different sign-ins. And so there's just a lot of the basics that students aren't aware of. A lot of times a student might just think it's kind of like Kleenex, and ChatGPT just means like everything AI.
Yeah.
So having them understand the differences of signing in with Copilot versus ChatGPT, what's image generation, what's DALL-E 3. There's just a lot of terms and phrases that students might not be aware of. And then back to what I was saying earlier, even being able to say, AI isn't just ChatGPT. AI could be getting real-time personalized coaching on reading, or AI might be the ability, like I was saying, to identify audio signals and visual signals in speaker progress. That's AI. It might not be the AI that you've been thinking about, but just there's different flavors of these things. And so it shouldn't always just be AI, and that's sort of like this broad spectrum of anything and everything and nothing all at the same time. So I think those are important points to be able to explain as an educator.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I just was going to, so really, just to sum up, students should be thinking about this, and teachers as well, as a coach, a thought partner, a research assistant, and maybe just somebody who can just help them be that much more efficient so that they can do the most important aspects of teaching.
Yeah, like a teacher should think about it as a drudgery reduction tool. To be,
I love that.
That's what
Okay.
I call it. Like, help you reduce the stuff that's you would say is not a great use of your time.
Efficiency,
Yeah.
making all the planning more efficient. Well, I think that that's a perfect segue to really talk about how AI has the potential that AI has to individualize learning. And I think that with that goes, where does the teacher fit into this, right? Because I think you've sort of got those future forward thinkers who can envision classrooms where every child is sitting in front of a laptop computer with headphones on, kind of isolated with this individualized learning. So tell us about the potential and also the role of the teacher.
Yeah, well, I think right now the learning accelerators, separate from generative AI, these learning accelerators I talked about, things like reading, speaking, math, information literacy. So here's an example on the educator side that we do with this. We have a tool called Reading Progress that allows an educator to help work with students on oral reading fluency, right? The ability to read something out loud. And historically, educator might have a reading passage. They'll take the student out into the hallway. Student practices reading that passage out loud. Teacher has a copy. They've got a timer in many cases. There's, circling maybe different words like mispronunciations, and they might give that student feedback afterwards. It's very time consuming. It's hard for the educator to like sit there and focus and listen. There might be like loud noises in the hallway. The student might get distracted. All those things take an enormous amount of time, and it's very hard to personalize. So with Reading Progress, what we did, we've helped digitize that process, and we more recently introduced some AI into the process to help the educator personalize. And again, scale. Instead of, sometimes there are grandparents that help do that process in the hallway because the teacher can't do it fast enough. Sometimes there's other volunteers. And so with Reading Progress, the student now the teacher can generate a passage or give the student a certain passage and assign it out to the class. And the students can practice reading out loud, and we record that audio and video stream of the student reading that passage. And then they turn that in, and the educator can get a lot of AI to help mark up that passage and do the word speed, do the accuracy, and watch the video, listen to the student, all these different types of things. So here's where AI can come and help the educator scale. So now what we also have added is the ability for the educator to generate reading passages. Could be for the whole class, could be for certain chunks of the class, could be for certain students. And the educator can pick topics. So pick like, I'd like this passage to be about animals at this reading level, and it integrates certain words so we know what words the students were struggling with, because what we do is when all those students turn in passages, we can analyze all the different reading and know what were the most mispronounced words in the class. So you make an assignment to your whole class, and all the data is captured. We say, oh, here's a word cloud. Here's the top 5 words that your class struggled with. Or here are the top 5 words these 2 students struggled with. Or on a per student basis, we know what were the most challenging words. So imagine now with generative AI, this is what generative AI is really good at. You're like, okay, I know here's the top 5 words that these 3 students were struggling with. Make a story about animals, make it targeted for age 11 students, make it in a certain language, make it this long, and inject the 5 words that they were struggling with into the story. So create a story that adds those 5 words into it. And now we're going to assign that passage out to those 3 students. And for this group of students, we're going to make a different passage. And it's going to be about sports, because these 5 kids like sports. It's going to be targeted at age 12, a little bit higher level. And we're going to inject the 3 words that those students are struggling with into that passage. And then, by the way, this is the drudgery reduction. We also allow the educator to generate comprehension questions based on that passage. So generate some draft comprehension questions. Great, I can edit those, I can tweak it if it looks fine. Okay, fine, now push that passage out. So now you've got the educator can generate customization and personalization based on those specific students' needs or engaging things that they're interested in and injecting the words that they're struggling with. So that's an example. Again, it was drawn out, but I think I'm trying to give a detailed example of educators still very involved, but it's helping them scale and do things that were very time consuming in the past. And now they can actually get more personalized with their students because the AI is speeding up the process. And what we even do is on top of that, because we're going to be talking about dyslexia a little bit and reading, we have phonemic analysis and phonics rules analysis that is automatically run on how they're reading. So now at the phonics level, we know, okay, vocalic R's were a problem with this student, or the long A, short A, or whatever. There's lots of different phonics rules out there. We can gather all that automatically and provide reports and charts to the educator after the fact. So now the educator, with the help of AI, has generated personalized passages. They've injected the words that students are struggling with, and they can see a phonics rule breakdown of their whole class or individualized students after the fact. If you're a teacher today without any of that technology, how long is that going to take you to do? Like, how many teachers sit down and analyze every phonics rule of every word of every student that's practicing reading out loud? There's 0 to 1, not many, because it's just too time consuming. Now you can get that for not doing, it's like baked in. So it's a long-winded way, but I like those examples because they're real world examples. We're talking about reading here as well, and students with dyslexia in some cases. That's a way where the educator is still involved. It's just helping them scale out and go much more broadly. And the student in this case is recording themselves, but many students have told us they hate reading out loud in front of the teacher who's sitting there doing things like this because they feel a little more stigmatized. Sometimes students with dyslexia don't feel comfortable reading out loud in front of other people because they're already feeling a little bit self-conscious. So students are less stigmatized. Educators can gather faster and more regular feedback and personalization, and AI can help them scale out and personalize the content in this cases. And there's other examples of that too that we have but I think that was a really good one that shows ways that educators can personalize and students can do their work as well.
Have you come across any schools or districts that have put something like this in place in sort of a programmatic way, where they've seen some academic outcomes that were really successful? Because I think that
Yes,
would be helpful guidance for a lot of our schools.
yeah, so we just published this research maybe 2 months ago or a month ago. We worked with Fresno Unified in California, large district, very high free and reduced lunches. And we worked with them on a larger scale to ESSA Tier 2, ESSA, Department of Education, Tier 2, ESSA 2, Tier 2 study, which is close to the top. Like the ESSA Tier 1 is even larger scale, but we did it across, I think it was 1,400 students. And what you do is you got group of 700, group of 700. Beginning of the year, they do the standardized test to sort of measure where everyone's at. And they broke them into two groups. One group that did the same way that they've always done oral reading fluency. The other group uses reading progress in some of those ways that I just mentioned about the ability to roll out oral reading fluency assignments and analyze these things and have students record them, etc. So they ran that across the entire year, and they did testing in December and then testing in late May. And it came out that it did improve across these two groups. It improved oral reading fluency by about 5 points on a reading test. So like I won't go into all the detailed ways, but like from a 50 to a 55, let's say. That's across K through 6. They did it with English language learners, went from 50 to 59, so improved by about 9 points in reading. And this is across a larger group of students. This is not just one class. This is 720 students. And so I can give a link to that research study. It just came out recently. And that was our largest scale study of reading progress. We're also working with Stanford on a study actually with students with dyslexia on our other tool, Reading Coach, that we'll talk about and show a little bit later. That research will be kicking off pretty soon, but it's not completed yet. So we're trying to do a larger scale study with students with dyslexia and Reading Coach.
Oh, that's great news.
Yeah.
That is great news and a terrific segue, because I'm curious to talk a little bit about reading remediation, specifically for our students with dyslexia or other language-based learning disabilities, and what type of feedback are the students getting while they're reading, and what types of prompts are put into place to really help them progress in their reading development?
Yeah, so this is a great topic, and I'll actually show some of the software that our team has put out. We have a product called Reading Coach, and it again back to that hackathon. Sort of, if you trace the sort of the winding road, we started with the immersive reader, which has been really popular and inclusive way to help students with reading. That led us into Reading Progress, which was our oral reading fluency tool to help educators make these reading fluency assignments and students get lightweight coaching. And then that led us further into Reading Coach. And then this new AI world sort of has taken it further, which is this standalone AI-powered reading coach. And I'll show that here. But before I show it, I'll talk about a couple of the aspects. One was keeping students engaged it's a big challenge. If you're trying to get students to help improve with reading, keeping them engaged and keeping them excited about what they're reading is a big part of that, right? If I'm a student and I'm getting a boring, C Dick run, CJ run, C spot run, or whatever, the same old standardized thing that I've gotten for 30 years or whatever it might be, I may or may not be excited about that. But also, how can we make that reading surface inclusive and engaging? So we've used the same immersive reader technology as you're going to see in this Reading Coach little video that I show. We use that same inclusive reading back, because I can change the background, change the sizing, change some of the fonts, the colors, make it feel more inclusive. And how can we use AI to help that student keep the story engaging? So if you ever seen those choose your own adventure books, remember that? I get to pick a path. Like,
Sure.
how would you like the story to go? It's like your choice. Turns out generative AI is amazing to make that really easy. So each student can pick their own path, right? Like when I read maybe I'm into a certain character or a certain location, you're into something different, you're into something different. Great, you can all go in different directions. And then on top of that, remember how I said the educator can know what were the most challenging words that student had they were struggling with? Where were the accuracy problems that student had? Well, again, because with AI, you can take those words and inject them into whatever story that you're making. With a reading coach, we can take those words, inject them into each chapter. So when you're picking how you want that adventure to go, behind the scenes, we're taking the words you struggled with and injecting them into the next chapter. So you're getting more practice on the things you're struggling with without you even knowing. So with all that, I will share my screen here and I'll take us through Reading Coach. And this is available right now for free. It's available in the web. It's available as a Windows app. And it's in preview right now, but it's going to be generally available probably in about a month. So then it'll be available for school accounts or home accounts. So if you have parents that might say, hey, I want to be able to do this at home, great, they can do that at home. It doesn't have to be at school. It can be at home as well. So you have multiple options. Okay, so I'm going to walk through how does Reading Coach look and act. So we've got Avery here, and she's going to practice her fluency, practice reading out loud. And so she signed in a Reading Coach, and one of the options you can see here is to create a story using AI. So Avery's going to choose a character that she's interested in. So in this case, she's going to choose a dog. And then she's going to choose what's the location. Okay, I'm going to choose space, dogs in space. And then she's going to choose her reading level. So she's chosen reading level 3, and AI is going to generate this chapter for her. Now, before she starts reading, this is that immersive reader background. She's going to make the font a little bit bigger. She's going to choose a dark background. We also have things like a picture dictionary built in, so she can listen to that word. But now she's ready to start reading, and she's going to click the microphone, and she's going to get a countdown.
Overall, the dog was always curious about the world beyond his backyard.
So she's going to finish reading. Now, when she's done with that chapter, she gets we kind of make this fun. She gets time spent reading, her accuracy, and also the words to practice. This is where she can get coaching on the words she wants to practice. So these are the words she struggled with. She can drill into one, and she can stretch it, break it to syllables.
Colorful.
Listen, and then practice.
Colorful.
So she'll get feedback.
Great reading.
And she can go through all those words. But now she gets to choose what happens next in the story. So she's going to choose, I want to choose path A, Rover goes stargazing. Now it generates the new chapter for her, and she's practicing the next chapter, and those challenging words were integrated into the next chapter. So she's picking how this goes, and we're integrating it. She can unlock new characters. So if she reads for 10 minutes, she can now add otters into her stories. And again, we track the time spent reading. She gets different achievements, and it even tracks the history. So if she keeps track of the story that she's created, here's the different stories that she's done in the past. Now, separate from the story creation, we've got some passages in our library. So we've got ReadWorks passages. So these are non-AI stories. These are some passages. Or she can paste her own passages in. So if she has content that she wants to practice on her own, she can put any of that into there, and she can practice reading that out loud as well. So all of that is available right now at coach.microsoft.com. And again, this can be for schools. This can be for consumers, parents, and kids at home. It's available in the web. It's available in Windows. And we're also in the future, we're going to have integration into learning management systems. So things like Canvas or Schoology, or depending what learning management system your school might be using. So I think that's a great example that really shows that personalization, practice. AI is involved, but it's not in your face. It's subtle, and it's also engaging. So the part that is probably most exciting for students is engagement. And one of my favorite stories about Reading Coach that I saw in person when we were launching this, it was at a conference in London. on the last day of the conference, they have a bunch of students that come in. So normally these are conferences with grown-ups, but on the last day, they allow students, and schools will bring their students in to check out all the cool new fun stuff. There are a bunch of 9 and 10-year-old classmates who came in, and they were at the little booth trying out Reading Coach. And each student would take a turn to generate the next chapter and then practice reading. And they were getting really involved, and their teacher saying, "Okay, kids, it's time to go. We have to go to the next place." And they were making them all leave the booth. And this one little girl's like, "But I want to find out what happens. Like, I don't want to leave yet," because she was so excited. They were all having so much fun generating the next part of their story. They didn't want to leave. And so that's great. When you can get that level of engagement and have the students practice reading out loud, that's kind of what we're looking for.
So we can help them with their reading fluency,
Mhm.
help them even become more engaged and create stories. We can help them with Search Coach learn how to properly find vetted information.
Mhm.
We can improve their presentation skills because I know from that particular tool, I use my hands too much. It's a great tool for teachers to practice as well, as I've shared with many of our faculty.
Yeah.
And then the latest really is in math. Is that right?
Yes, Math
So can you
Progress
tell us
is in
about that?
yeah. Math Progress is in private preview right now. That's our 4th learning accelerator. And it's going to be coming out globally, like leaving private preview into broad availability in November, so next month. And it's interesting. So this is a great example where the term AI gets thrown around a lot. And before AI became all the rage, everything was called machine learning. It's not as cool as AI. So in particular, though, math is something with generative AI. Generative AI is not always great with math. It's like really good, but it's not with math. You need it to be like accurate. It can't hallucinate stuff. Unless you're doing story problems. One nice thing you can do with math is generate fun story problems, sort of like making reading engaging. You could say, what topics are you interested in? And maybe make story problems about the thing you're interested in. Generative AI can do that well. But we've worked with math for many years. So Microsoft has actually part of the education team, some experts with machine learning and math. And there's a very structured and regimented way you can work with generating math problems and identifying mistake categories that don't really involve generative AI. So Math Progress, the tool that we were about to launch, really focuses on generating practice sets and identifying different patterns and different ways, mistake patterns that students are making. So it allows educators to go in, and it's not about math curriculum, it's really about generating different types of questions and topics and sets based on different categories that the educator can choose. But then the educator can also do things like mix up the different answer banks or shuffling questions, allowing students to give them feedback on, was this hard, just right? Like what was the difficulty? Because a lot of times educators don't have the patterns of difficulty of what the students are rating the questions that they're getting to practice. And then also this machine learning will help us identify patterns of mistakes that are being made. So if you give a set of questions and practice out to your students with Math Progress, and it gives distraction answers, so it'll have the wrong answer. We know that students might make this certain category of mistakes. We can generate to sort of lure them into think, oh, I got it right, even though they made those are called distraction answers. We gather all this information automatically for the educator. And so when they get all the turn-ins and submissions, we can say, okay, your students are making these patterns of mistakes, basic operations, or negativity in certain, like we can identify those patterns and organize that back to the teacher. The students can also not only fill out the problem, but they can attach to show their work. So they can attach photos, they can attach OneNote pages. So the educator can gather the paper, they can gather OneNote pages if they use OneNote in their class, and they can also gather lots of insights. And then we show graphs and patterns to show improvement or not over time across different types of practices, exercises, or mistake patterns. So it's a lot of, I would call it old school AI. It's not generative AI, but it's machine learning. It's a lot of math intelligence that we have, but it's not the sort of ChatGPT flavor of AI that a lot of people think about. So that's also, all these things are free. So reading progress, speaker progress,
Amazing.
math progress, search progress, they're all free. They're all built into Teams for Education. And if your school doesn't use Teams, let's say that you use Canvas or Schoology or some other popular learning management system, we've recently just launched what's called LTI. That's a common standard to integrate other tools into learning management systems. So if you use Canvas, for example, there's now a way to integrate learning accelerators into Canvas. Or if you use Schoology, same thing. You can integrate the learning accelerators into your learning management system. So that's something that came out to make them even more available beyond just Teams. That's just an FYI.
Well, that will make a lot of tech directors happy.
Yeah, there's a top
It
request
certainly
from tech
will.
directors, actually.
Well, I'm curious to know, there's so much available already, and the field, the space is just changing so rapidly. What do you envision for the future in terms of how AI will be used to support students, teachers, but ultimately, shape kind of a new landscape for us in education?
Well, my sense is, and I'm not saying a lot of new things here because I think it's been talked about so much in the last 2 years, but I think on the educator side, you're going to see, again, a lot of efficiency and drudgery reduction and personalization at scale. So just the ability to save enormous amounts of time, to really help personalize for students, to get a lot more insights about what's happening in the classroom across many different topics that we might have thought were impossible in the past. And, like who would have thought 5 years ago that I could get that level of communication and presentation data about my students automatically, right? That's just not something I think most people thought about. And through many of the things we talked about today, just a lot of efficiency and personalization and data. On the student side, I think the ultimate dream is that any student can get high quality, personalized tutoring on any topic they want. And again, this has been talked about in science fiction for, I don't know, 100 years. And so that's going to be much more of reality. I think it's going to take time to get really good. I think it's talked about always like, oh, just like next month, we're going to have personalized AI tutors for everyone. I think that'll take time for them to get good. But I do think that direction is definitely coming. And it's just a matter of when and how and those pieces. I think the other part is the ability for students to study and practice, separate from tutoring, just AI study guides, AI tutoring, AI practicing, AI quizzing, AI flashcards, all the things that students might do now that they have to spend a lot of time on creating, or teachers have to spend a bunch of time creating study guides. I think AI is just going to speed up that process enormously. I mean, even recently, if you saw, I think this is really cool, this new notebook concept from Google that came out that can create AI podcasts based on content, like make AI voices for, it sounds like podcast hosts. So for people who want to audio study, a study guide with a podcast notion of two people talking back and forth. I think that's really cool. That's super inclusive for people who like to learn that way and just listen versus just like reading dense text. That's a great new form of audio to learn and study things. So there'll be a lot of stuff in that space, I think, that is just going to get better and better. And the last one that I get excited about, and that I think I mentioned briefly, and I think it's probably more for educators and staff, but that ability to use natural language to generate really interesting data patterns and dashboards and the way that you get insights, whether you're an educator or a principal or a superintendent. I think unlocking data at scale to be able to see and do things that, like, I could hire a consultant for $1 million in a month, which most schools don't want to do, to unlock that level of dashboard data. That's kind of like, it's like the dark wizards of data are the only ones who can create these things that are really complicated. unlocking that at scale is really, really powerful. Being able to get insights that you normally just aren't going to get, honestly. I think unlocking data with natural language is going to be really powerful with AI. I think it's going to take it next level.
Well, I would love to see that. We've talked about different ways, that Microsoft in particular is so skilled at supporting students with dyslexia. Are there ways that we can support them in writing as well as the search and the reading and the digital citizenship piece?
There are, I think, I mean, even so, Microsoft Word, the tool a lot of people are familiar with, Word has there's some free writing tools baked into Word, something called Editor, and that gives a lot of feedback, not only on the classic spelling and grammar checking, there's things like clarity, there's inclusive language. I think Copilot in Word, and this has been launched recently sort of for the commercial space. And while I don't have anything to share today, I can imagine in the future we'll have things like this that get brought in. But if there's a new thing called Writing Coach that's launched for commercial to help give coaching on your writing. So in the same way we have a reading coach and a speaker coach, you could totally imagine there's a writing coach. And over time, these things will have more memory and be more personalized to how you write. So instead of just treating everyone like a generic, Microsoft Word is used by a lot of lawyers. We don't want to treat everyone in the world like a lawyer, right? If you're a 14-year-old student who might be struggling with writing, this coach over time will have more memory about how you're writing, what you're writing, where you might need extra support, and be able to adapt to you as your own personalized writing coach. So I think you'll see a lot more of that in the future.
That sounds great.
It does.
Yeah.
Did you want to?
No, I'm really excited about what the future holds. I'm excited about what we already have access to be honest with you. I think that, personally, I can say that there was an initial hesitation. And then once I started learning about different tools and using them, it became a very friendly experience. And I'm really enjoying exploring it. I guess maybe that would be a closing question for us in terms of folks who are a little bit reticent to bring AI into their classrooms or who aren't really sure how to make space for that with their planning. What words can you share with them to take the next step?
Well, I think at a general level, I would say, at some point you just have to jump in and start trying these things out because your students are going to be doing a lot of these things, and at least being aware, I think, you owe it to yourself or your students to just be aware. You don't need to be an expert. And more tactically and more tangibly, like I mentioned, and I'm happy to share these with you folks, and you could put them in the links to your podcast. Microsoft, for example, has 2 free professional development courses online in the Microsoft Learn Center. One is AI for Educators 101, which is great, right? It's like assumes no knowledge and explains just the basics, even the terminology. What's a large language model? How are these things built? How should I think about it as an educator? What is image generation? What's responsible AI? And so that's a great one. That's been our most popular course actually right now, is that sort of AI for Educators 101. And the second one is, how could I use Copilot as an educator? Copilot is a free version, does things like it's more safe and secure and compliant. It does citations, but again, it's just a Copilot for Educators 101. And how can I use this in the classroom? It has you practice and use basic concepts. And again, it seems pretty much no knowledge. So those are 2 great courses. They don't require a PhD in any of this stuff. They're being used by educators globally around the world who've been very happy with it. So you've already got people who've used it and loved it from countries all over the world. So those are 2 great starting points, I think, for any educator or administrator to check out.
I love that. Mike, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate your time. And I know the schools that are going to be tuning in are going to love all of these different ideas. Are there any other closing thoughts?
Well, I think it's going to be an exciting time in the coming years. And our organization and Microsoft, the education team, are working on a ton of stuff. We're working with educators, working with students, we're prototyping, iterating, and we thank you, educators that are out there working with students every day, students with dyslexia and beyond. And yeah, it should be an exciting, fun time. I look forward to it.
Thank you so much. We really
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching AI Insights in EdTech Leading Voices. Tune in again next time as Holly Clark, AI and digital learning expert and author, joins us to share her knowledge and insights on blended learning in the classroom. See you then.